Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications when you've subscribed so you can catch us live, and then also rate us 5 stars if you're listening to this on a podcast platform. And I command you, to those listening live in the YouTube chat, to say hello to Bradley Alsop, my friend, my co-host, my buddy. I said friend. That's right. Kind of redundant.
That's right. Say hi to me. Everyone must say hi.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta give Bradley a little bit of love because the Jets are a complete disaster, and you had to watch another standalone game, probably hungover from Thanksgiving on Friday. Black Friday football. Come and watch your football on Amazon Prime, which is also a complete monopoly of all goods. And then when you're watching Black Friday football on this streaming platform that's also a shopping marketplace, you can get deals here. There's nothing dystopian about that at all.
It was
oh my god, the Hail Mary kick, the Hail Mary return for a touchdown.
It was not pleasant.
Oh my god, Bradley. Look,
the only way, it's not enough for there to be something cataclysmically embarrassing that happens to the Jets. It has to happen on some sort of like day of repute.
Oh yeah.
The butt fumble was on Thanksgiving Day.
Oh,
and
right.
This Hail Mary pick six, which like was simultaneously an amazing football play from Javon Holland, but was also probably one of the most embarrassing things I've seen from an offense in quite some time. Tim Boyle threw that up like it was basically like a beach ball, and Holland just had to wait like 10 seconds for it to come down.
Yeah,
and then juked out every single member of the skill position team, offensive line, and then literally broke Tim Boyle's ankles on his way to the end zone.
Which was incredible because like my father, he is a big New York sports fan, and I was with him on Friday, and in his older years, he's kind of lapsed in being a Jets fan. He says that, like, he doesn't like football because of the violence, which is perfectly valid. In part, I just feel like he has other interests, and that's what he's chosen to make his reason. But, I had Tyreek Hill on the fantasy team. My fiance and I were like, let's turn on the game. And immediately my dad gets completely sucked back in as if he never was like, a lapsed Jets fan before. I mean, it's the same thing with the Knicks, right? Although he still cares about the Knicks to a certain degree. And he's just started to get into it. And I believe, like, did the Jets had that terrible Tua interception for a pick six. And then it looked like, oh wait, the Jets might actually be in this, and then it was the Hail Mary and the kick return, and he literally laughed and was like, "Oh my gosh, the Jets!" And I said, "This is a Jets fan from way back who watched their only Super Bowl win, and even he understands that this is a Jets play for sure."
And to be clear, that pick six happened, and then DJ Reed intercepted the ball to get the Jets to be in the position where Tim Boyle was offered up a half-ending Hail Mary pick six.
Yeah.
They literally received the ball when they weren't supposed to have it due to a DJ Reed interception, only to literally get scored on with 2 seconds left in the half.
I'm so sorry.
It's cool.
All right. Well, and
we're all having a good
honestly,
time.
The other Thanksgiving games, that was a Black Friday game. I'm so sorry, but the other three, they were a little bit forgettable in the sense that they weren't super close.
More just surprising the Packers, I think.
Oh yeah,
laid the beat down on the Lions, and
I thought that the Commanders might cover. I thought the Seahawks might make it interesting. Although that by the Seahawks 49ers game, I'm struggling to stay awake with all the turkey and wine I have in my belly. But it is it was honestly impressive to see Jordan Love go off like that, and makes you think like, okay, he's starting to turn the corner. He had a bit of a lull. He had a good start to the year, then a bit of a lull. There were questions about him as the future quarterback, which is just crazy to me given the fact that like Aaron Rodgers' first season as a starter didn't go very well, and this Packers team could not be more young at
They're so
skill position
inexperienced,
players.
all of them.
So inexperienced, and this is a bit of a retooling. And
Yeah.
like they do have talent. I mean, Rashawn Gary had a great game, and I will say, call out to Jason Miles, who was ribbing me on the Majority Report on Wednesday about my take that I don't think Jared Goff is very good and is more of a product of a great offensive system and a head coach who is one of the better ones in football. Man, has he had 2 bad weeks in a row. Even though they did end up winning against the Bears, he had multiple turnovers, and he has an issue with fumbling. He has an issue doing that. And,
Jason might have cast a hex.
well, no, it's just because I was right the entire time.
You think it's the workings of superstition.
Yes, no, I think
it's truly just pure reason.
it's just the power of my mind.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think the other thing that's notable is Nate Tice over at The Athletic pointed this out. Beyond some of Goff's recent offensive struggles, it hasn't helped too that the Lions defense over the past 2 or 3 weeks has been playing really, really poorly. Not just like bottom half, but like some of their metrics are like literally like 30th, 31st level. Like so that has kind of swooned a little bit. Whereas I think what was also keeping them afloat, along with the explosiveness of the offense, was just having some competence on defense. And with that falling out from under them, they can't really withstand any sort of like real deficit if they're giving up that many points.
Yeah, no, it is unfortunate because like they do have, I mean, Aiden Hutchinson is going to be the kind of player that makes a difference, but you have to have more than him. And they did make that really smart signing of CJ Gardner-Johnson, who's injured and can't make a difference there, but they need help in that secondary.
Yeah.
Like the pick of Jeff Okudah, which I mean, I listen to analysts who were saying he's like not very impressive. He's just quite well coached. And they ended up being right. I'll shout out my guy Chris Sims on that front. That set that franchise back because they really should have been able to pick a more blue chip defensive player there. And they just need a few more pieces on that side of the ball. Like, I just don't think they're ready to compete with the Eagles and the 49ers in the NFC. But they're definitely making the playoffs, and they'll make it interesting.
And honestly, I think the Eagles. But I'll get to the Eagles and the 49ers in a second. But I think one notable thing from an otherwise not super notable game with the Cowboys and Commanders was that Doron Bland broke the single season record for individual pick sixes, which is a crazy stat that this one guy is not, with the combination of good positioning and luck and ability to break tackles from the offense, has been able to literally strike pay dirt 5 times.
It's
5
amazing.
touchdowns.
It's amazing.
Is a really crazy thing to behold, and a truly exceptional single season accomplishment. So that was cool to see. But the 49ers, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the Eagles game, but the Niners-Seahawks game also just goes to show that still, to me, it's still truly, barring any kind of unforeseen bad injury luck or anything like that, the 49ers I just still think are outside of the Eagles just like the class of the NFC. I still just think on both ends of the ball, and when they're really firing on all cylinders and every option is open for them. Losing Talanoa Hufanga is a really tough blow for them at safety. That's very unfortunate for that. They're the spine of their defense, but the offense looking the way it's been looking and it being this still kind of explosive and almost inevitable a little bit, I think it'd still be enough to really make them very honestly. It is going to be if there's a potential that it's a run back of last year's NFC Championship game, and Brock Purdy is healthy and playing kind of mostly mistake-free football, or kind of less, if there are less kind of high variance passes that he is trying to fit into certain windows, and there's just no Josh Johnson contingency or Sam Darnold contingency, or Christian McCaffrey having to freaking hand the ball off because they don't have a quarterback, that game is going to be very close if it is the 49ers and the Eagles.
It's a rematch next week. 49ers Eagles in Philadelphia, and the Eagles are open. This is such bulletin board material. I just saw this. They're opening as underdogs at home. And that is not going to bode well with that team.
Interesting.
And Nick Sirianni is that kind of like little shit that's going to be getting in their ear about it.
They love like, for a team that has lost one game to the Jets, they're similar. They're akin to the Golden State Warriors the last few years of loving, despite being like odds on the best team in the league, doing a lot of like nobody believes in us stuff. Everybody said we couldn't do it.
Oh, well, I mean, the Patriots in their heyday used to do that when everyone believed in them. And it's just like the hallmark of a chippy team where you have to create those boogeymen. I mean,
exactly.
Let's get into it with the Eagles here because they're just amazing. Like Jalen Hurts hasn't had as good of a year this year by any metric.
But this was an unbelievable game by him.
I mean, he was not good until he needed to be.
Yeah, right. And he has like the clutch. I actually think,
my God.
As much as I know some people, obviously, it's intangible and like woo-wooey almost a little bit as a sports fan. But some guys, you kind of see them and you're like, oh, he's built for big games. Like he just knows when he really like the thing physically and mentally. There's an alignment I feel like for him where like he just like goes into superhero mode and just like wills his way into keeping them competitive in a tougher game than they've had in a while.
Yeah, it is. I mean, until really the second half. He was gosh, I'm trying to find these statistics on here. But he really did not do much in the first half of that football game. And then though the Bills started to just kind of continue to move the ball and you really saw the difference, I would say, in ability or not ability, I should say. You saw the difference in what Jalen Hurts is required to do on that Eagles team versus what Josh Allen is required to do on that Bills team. And we'll get into how unfair the criticism of Josh Allen is in a second. But like, Jalen Hurts wasn't very good for most of that football game until he absolutely needed to be. And he had that incredible touchdown on 3rd and 15 in the fourth quarter when they were down to Olamide Zaccheaus, okay? And
that was truly just searching for a guy open, and it was a tough throw.
He put it in a place where only his guy could get it, right up over the defenders in the back of the end zone. Yeah. And it just like there are concerns about the Eagles that I don't think are reflected in their record. Like they gave up 505 yards to the Bills and Josh Allen, and Josh Allen was threw for 339 yards. He had 2 touchdown runs and just was outside of that one mistake, that interception, an absolutely incredible performance by Josh Allen. But it's not enough because unlike the Bills, the Eagles can win a variety of different ways. They can win with their defense being opportunistic. That wasn't the case in this game. But they can win with Jalen Hurts when he decides he's going to be clutch with his arm. They can win when he runs the football like he did in overtime in that great play where they clearly read that I think that the Bills were playing man and he decided to just run up on the left side. Ben
Solak from The Ringer like kind of diagrammed it out that there was a similar play that the Bears did. That the Bears went kind of cover 0 on this exact look with DeAndre Swift or whoever was their running back at the time motioning the other way, and the safety up top. This time it was either Micah Hyde or Terrell Bernard on the Bills went over with Swift, but that meant that if it was an option, which it was,
yes,
no one was covering Hurts.
Exactly.
So everyone went to the other side, and Hurts just had a clear line through to the end zone.
Yeah,
like, it was just a true tactical mistake by the Bills to run a cover 0 look where they had to man up on somebody, but no one had Hurts. Jordan Mailata said, I think at the end of the game, that as soon as they saw Bernard or Hyde, one of the safeties, go with Swift, they were like, he's scoring.
Yeah.
Because they don't have anyone matching up with him.
And so they can win in those ways with the quarterback position, both by his legs and then, oftentimes when they need to with his arm. I think that's maybe one of the only inconsistencies they have on offense is that Hurts is just not like, he has a lot of things that he does well, but he doesn't dice people up with in the passing game. But then you can also win with DeAndre Swift or Kenneth
Who's been great. I
Gainwell.
mean, they've gotten so much out of those guys with the offensive
Swift
line.
looks like a different guy, but partly because of that line. But like the Eagles are, by my money, the best team in the NFL, and I think you can just see it based on their battle testedness. Like the 49ers are blowing a lot of people out, and that's good. And they don't want to. They don't want to lose the division. They want to be able to play the Eagles at home in the NFC Championship. I'm not sure that's going to work. Given the fact that the Eagles only have one loss to the Jets. But the Eagles showing the ability to win these tough games and win them late, even when they're not playing their best football, is so impressive. And it's the making of a championship team. I hate to say it, but like they really are a juggernaut and a dynasty for a while, even if, I mean, I hope they don't win the championship as a Giants fan, but I can't see how they're not really the front runner at this point.
And just to that, for those stats you were looking for per NFL.com, Hurts had 33 passing yards, 1 interception, 22 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown. And they were down by double digits at the half. And then he obviously very much turned it around with the ensuing 4 touchdowns that he had either through the air or with his feet. A beautiful pass to Devontae Smith, who I think has been not as involved as he was in the offensive scheme necessarily last year. I mean,
oh yeah, he looked so good in this game. He had such leaping ability, and you just see the athleticism.
There are certain things where it's, I think you realize sometimes even when the Eagles aren't finding it in certain capacities, that even if like someone like Smith was sort of underutilized at some point in the game, that he can still just do stuff like that.
Oh,
but that's
yeah.
just all. They're like when they're healthy and they have all these guys, when they have AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Gainwell and Swift on the ground, like they just have so many options. Even like a one last Twilight ride Julio Jones is available to these guys.
I know. I mean, they did some weird play with him where like they were trying to run him out of the backfield, and I got news for you. Julio Jones is more of a point and catch kind of guy at this point in his career.
I don't think you want him.
That was a questionable play call, but yeah, I'm not gonna criticize the Eagles really, because I'm so impressed by the makeup of their team and what they do. And
the one thing I will say though is that I think that was a horse collar at the end.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, that was it was a pretty crappy call, I think, to give Allen intentional grounding, even though he really his jersey was ripped.
Yeah,
I don't think he really had much of a chance to direct
garbage.
The ball somewhere.
Speaking of Josh Allen, if I hear one more thing about Josh Allen's interceptions, I'm gonna blow a gasket. As if Josh Allen is the problem with this football team.
He was like a man possessed yesterday. He was doing every single thing he could to keep this team in the game.
He made one mistake, and I'm gonna say this now. There are a lot of quarterbacks that make mistakes. Quarterbacks throw balls behind guys, in front of guys where it's too close to another player, could get intercepted. I mean, I saw that Tua interception, who is statistically having an amazing year, that was run back towards the end of the second quarter against the Jets, was atrocious. And it's because Tua throws rhythm passes. He's a rhythm passer. He is anticipating guys open. He's not necessarily throwing them open with the force of his arm, aka his ability as a thrower. Josh Allen's ability as a thrower is unmatched, except by maybe Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud. Like, we're in elite territory here. I mean, I'm even putting Stroud up there because he's such a pinpoint passer. But like, there's not all interceptions are equal. And that interception that Josh Allen threw in that game wasn't great. But why is Josh Allen forced into situations where he's turning the ball over more than other elite quarterbacks? It's because he does not have the, I would say, offensive scheme nor the talent around him to have any other option. And it's been this way basically his entire career. Like the years with Daboll, they were much more efficient because Daboll was playing to his strengths and was getting guys open. But how many goddamn years do we have to deal with Stephon Diggs being the only option on offense? How are the Bills not recognizing, and how have they not recognized basically this entire time, that is way too much pressure on those two guys? I'll say it's not just Josh Allen, it's also Diggs. And yes, Josh Allen, 0-6 in overtime. I mean, it was
since the rules changed on his account. It's
yeah,
fucking
because it
brutal.
was so unfair because, of that epic unforgettable game against Mahomes in the divisional round where they were trading blows back and forth, and Josh Allen scored Josh Allen scored at the end of the half, I think, to send it to overtime, and he never got the ball back, even though he clearly would have scored. And now it's like they changed the overtime rules because of that. But I don't think I've seen since Aaron Rodgers in those worst days of Green Bay kind of collapsing before Mike McCarthy finally got fired, more put on a player than I see with Josh Allen in Buffalo. It's absolutely absurd. He has to do everything or they don't win a game. Like when he scored that touchdown, at the end, it was like at the end of the fourth quarter, and there was the
rushing touchdown.
Yeah, no, the passing touchdown, and it was a little under 2 minutes for the Eagles. I was like, all right, we're either going to overtime or they're losing the game, like no question whatsoever. And then when they were able to get the field goal in overtime, I was like, well, they're losing this game because the Bills, despite having a defensive head coach, can't seem to stop anybody on defense at this point. And I know that they've lost a lot of guys to injuries. I get it. But the problem really is that Sean McDermott is a defensive coordinator probably, and he's a good one. Like, the defenses do have good game plans, but as a head coach, I think he's failing Josh Allen, and more than McDermott, it really is Brandon Beane not surrounding this guy with the talent that he deserves to have, much like Aaron Rodgers in those final years in Green Bay, in order to capitalize on his talents. And it's just really hard to watch Josh Allen do everything. Muddy, bruised, bloodied.
His ability to throw in that type of weather that is insane. Like he
might have the strongest arm in the history of the NFL. It's like Elway and him. But
just to be able to, like, in like really adverse weather conditions, cold, rainy, he was still just like, there was still, like, backyard football elements to some of his throws, just like running all over, scrambling all over, like avoiding contact, and just like with a flick of the wrist, just uncorking some of these throws. It was so that was still pretty cool to watch. And obviously that rushing touchdown he had was literally basically a 1-on-11, like juke out every single person in your path to get to the end zone type play, which he's known for in some capacities. But
why did Sean McDermott burn those 2 timeouts at halftime?
Well, I think that before halftime. And this is to your point, though, is that I think the reason why both of us were saying too that I think that we both sort of thought, to an extent, regardless of how much we agreed with him or thought, how highly we thought of him, that the Ken Dorsey firing was sort of a scapegoating in a way, was because, one, I think it bears out a little bit because, one, Joe Brady's offensive game plan is not that dissimilar from Ken Dorsey's. He's just the one calling it now, and as opposed to Ken Dorsey. And two, the defensive lapses, I mean, as you said, definitely a lot of injuries on this Buffalo team that's not fully within their control, but a prime example of the shortcomings that have nothing to do with Allen are putting out a cover zero look on that touchdown in overtime.
There you go.
For the safety to motion over to the right side and for Hurts to essentially walk into the end zone. That has nothing to do with the offensive side of the ball, really. That's McDermott's emphasis.
And then we saw that in that divisional game. He wasn't able to scheme against Mahomes in overtime, even though, again, the rules were wrong, but like those were the rules at the time. He has trouble in situations, in situational football and game management.
And with clock management, and with timeout execution, all of that has remained regardless in conservative play game planning sometimes in terms of going for it on fourth down as opposed to sending out the field goal unit in some high leverage moments. That's happened multiple times throughout his tenure as the Bills coach. And then on the other hand, I understand that, it might have just been a 50-50 call because of where Gabe Davis thought the ball was going, but fundamentally, your number two, your supposed number two wide receiver went the wrong way on a route.
It's a joke that he's the number two wide receiver. I mean,
he went the wrong way.
I understand that Gabe Davis is a big body and he has a skill set in certain ways, and like I think that's maybe why he had a better game than he had in others. First of all, like the statistics for receivers, Josh Allen's getting him the ball because he's Josh Allen, not because Gabe Davis is this great talent, but also because he was a bigger body and in the rain it was safer to throw to him. He just ran the wrong route. He ran the wrong route. It was supposed to be and even if you have a miscommunication or it's an option route, he should have been looking back at his quarterback in that kind of situation to see where is he throwing the ball. And he didn't do that. Gabe Davis, like bottom third of number two receivers in the NFL.
I would say Khalil Shakir is probably, or at least in the games where the Bills have had more, have had kind of, they've poured on the points. He's been more steady consistent for them. And he's a second year fifth rounder. Like they
need an overhaul in roster construction philosophy.
Because you want to get as much as you can out of this like all world talent you have. And
his physical gifts are going to start to decline given the beating he takes.
Right, and improvements at the margins only do so much. And this is a team that still, by metrics, has a good offense. But it's also a lot still that, with those metrics, that offense that they are putting out there that is like in top five in a lot of those metrics is putting an extraordinary amount of their load and amount of their, weight on Josh Allen.
Yeah, exactly. So, rant over, but I do think the Bills are going to make a change, and I think that'll be one of the most highly coveted spots in the NFL. In addition to maybe the Chargers, but I don't know about that. We'll get to the Chargers in a little bit. The other really epic game, I would say, from the weekend was the Jaguars versus the Texans, and the Texans beat up on the Jaguars in Jacksonville in the first meetup that they had, and the Jags took that personally. They beat the Texans 24-21, and that means that the Jaguars are in the lead with an 8-3 record in the AFC South. I was interested to realize that they had not lost a game yet on the road. The Jaguars, they've won every single road game this season, and this was probably their most important road game thus far, given like what it meant for the division. And if the Texans had a sweep of them in their own division, that would be quite scary if the Texans got hot down the stretch. Even though I think clearly the Jaguars are the more well-rounded team. It's just that CJ Stroud's been lighting up the entire NFL. Lawrence had 364 yards, 2 total touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, Josh Allen, the defender, was dominant, had multiple sacks.
Yeah, he's having easily the best season of his career.
And it's a contract year for him. Yeah, so he's going to be an unrestricted free agent
extremely timely,
yeah. Yeah, good for him.
But he was always a really explosive and exciting athlete out of the University of Kentucky, but just the production, I think, didn't follow when he came to the NFL, but he's really putting it together this year.
Yeah, Travon Walker has been a bit of a disappointment. It seems like they probably should have...
first overall pick expenditure.
He was always a bit of a project. So
Absolutely.
I'm hoping that like his skill set as a pass rusher can continue to get better. Again, we talk about how young the Packers are. Like the Jaguars are even younger, but they just have higher end talent, and so it creates some volatility with the product they put out on the field. But I think they're starting to get it together. Like
because like Tyson Campbell in their secondary is a very good corner. He's I think in his second or third year. Devin Lloyd, who they spent a first round pick on at linebacker, is a second year player. They are definitely leaning on some guys who are certain, and Walker, as you said, second or third year player. Like they're leaning on a lot of these guys who contribute in high-end ways. And for some, it's paying off, obviously, with Allen kind of coming into his own now. But it's, I think, as you said, the youth aspect is definitely prominently prominent on their defense.
But if they can get it together on offense, they have more talent than the Chiefs.
I mean, even just the Calvin Ridley, Trevor Lawrence partnership is so fruitful so far.
Yeah.
Like even that high end, quarterback with receiver pairing is arguably, I would say, in some There aren't that many duos like that to me I think are already have that much synergy with one another.
Well, Ridley was kind of inconsistent to start the year, but he's had 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games.
Right.
And like I do think
he's so fast.
He's a really good talent, and I rooted for him ever since, he went through those mental health struggles, and then also after that the gambling thing, which he wrote about so well in the Players Tribune. So I like the Jaguars are a fun story. If they can put it together and if their talent clicks in the way that it could, and they reach their full potential, they could win the Super Bowl. They could totally win the Super Bowl, the Jaguars.
The ceiling being met for both their offense and defense. If that's the case, I think they are absolutely a AFC contender, especially with the void that has been left by the Bengals with Joe Burrow's absence, and 2, a potential to try and capitalize on some of the myriad offensive woes for the Chiefs that has been obviously out buttressed by their excellent defense, but definitely a little bit of I do feel like there is a little bit of a correction or course correction that some teams might be making about the Chiefs if people are actually believing that the offensive struggles or the unwillingness to click with the young receivers and Mahomes so far is legitimate, is real.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rashee Rice obviously had a good day against the Raiders, but it's the Raiders, and I'm not convinced that this offensive struggle session for the Chiefs offense is going away anytime soon. I just don't think Sky Moore is very good. Kadarius Toney can't stay on the field, and he's also very consistent in his route running.
But it's a similar thing to me with, even though I think potentially...
And Kelsey is 34 years old.
Right, in the age
and
with
distracted.
Kelsey.
I think that's freaking real. I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but he's like Mr. Celebrity doing People magazine interviews and jetting off to Argentina. I think it could affect your game.
Well, I also wonder, maybe it's also it might be you're pressurized enough as an NFL player, and then you become sort of a celebrity in your own right.
Yes.
But combined with that, I think with the Chiefs too, is that even though I would say the offensive line is better on the Chiefs, I also would submit that the even Stephon Diggs is probably better than anyone outside of Kelsey in the Chiefs receiver room.
Oh yeah.
So and not to say that Mahomes has this enormous amount of diversity, but I think almost the expectation post Tyreek Hill was you know what? He's probably good enough that he can literally drag any group of guys to the Super Bowl.
That's what I think they thought, and I think they trusted their draft evaluations. But they've made some errors, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I know.
Who I really liked coming out of LSU, was a bit of a
and I saw him get carries in the Eagles game, and I literally forgot he was on the team. I was like, oh my God.
And the way Pacheco runs the ball, it's like he wants to murder somebody
so violent.
every single time, and then it's for 7 yards.
He sees space, and he's like, you know what? No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
I have to go through 3 guys to get 3 yards.
I want as many bruises and bumps as possible on my ride home. I don't know how we started talking about the Chiefs, but
oh, sorry. I was just saying. I was just saying that to your point. I think some of these teams that I think would have maybe not had a larger avenue into further playoff success in the AFC, with potentially a little bit of an ebb from the Chiefs offense, as well as the Bengals obviously just becoming a non-factor most likely, gives them that opportunity. I feel the same way with the Ravens, which I'm sure we'll get to as well. But just to say about to wrap up the Jags and Texans game, I still thought the Texans played great. I mean, the Texans still, I think Stroud still played he had a few mistakes, but I think he still played really well. Kept them in the game with the Nico Collins touchdown in the second half. And honestly, the Texans defense for the most part is for not having that much skill, is a pretty scrappy unit.
They're well coached by DeMeco Ryans.
Totally. Jonathan Greenard, who I have never really, I say this sincerely, I was not familiar with this game. He's actually, I'm really impressed by how much he can get after the quarterback, and Will Anderson is as advertised so far. Which I was
wrong
great.
about him. I thought he would be a little too skinny or
totally.
undersized.
I thought Tweener potentially not enough, juice there, but he's been great. And The only thing I don't like, which this is not to slight any Texans, but I am seeing some Stroud Anderson shirts in the Bush Reagan font, and I do not like that.
Oh, but do you like Stroud boys stand back and stand by?
I like
because
that.
I find that hilarious.
I like Stroud boys. I'm a Stroud boy.
We are standing back and standing by.
It's a new
defend CJ
conservatism.
Stroud.
I don't like the old guard Reagan.
Yes.
I'm a Stroud boy. Like,
Yeah.
I get with the times, everybody. Okay?
You're a Bannonite,
exactly,
as opposed to a neoliberal.
It's not 1984 anymore. We're
Yeah.
in the 21st century. You have to be a Stroud boy.
Okay, isolationists, and then put our troops back on the southern border.
That's right. That's
what Stroud needs to do.
Yeah. Coleridge.
Anyway, a little political humor for everybody. Okay, top quarterbacks in yards per attempt this season: Brock Purdy at 9.4, Tua at 8.6, Stroud at 8.4.
Wow.
Now,
That's
what
awesome.
do they all have in common? Boop, 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 boop. Purdy, Tua, Stroud. Purdy, Tua, Stroud.
What do they all have in common?
They're all coached by guys from the Shanahan.
Okay, yes. Because at first I was going to say I feel like they have like more high end talent, but then as opposed to Stroud, but you're up for sure. Ryan's McDaniel and Shanahan.
No. But
Right?
well, I would say Bobby Slowick in that way.
Oh, well, yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
right.
but still, these are all guys from the Shanahan tree. So the Belichick, if the Belichick tree has rotted and like completely collapsed onto itself, I can't even think of a guy that's actually had success from the Belichick tree.
Yeah, I mean, Vrabel.
But Vrabel was a player.
Right. Not like a coaching descendant,
Yes.
actually. Yeah.
But if it's like, producing dead leaves, the Belichick tree, the Shanahan tree is producing mangoes and bananas
Yeah, very
and
ripe.
apples.
Extremely fruitful.
Very fruitful. So, his future is bright, I think, down in Texas, in Houston, even though.
And truly, they were
lost this
literally
game.
a crossbarred field goal from tying it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I also think that gives me a lot of solace in that this isn't like even these I think that what makes the Texans to me is still legit, even beyond just like a great success story or whatever, or like a Cinderella success story, is that they are remaining competitive in games that if certain things go their way, they could win these games against, as we were talking about, the Jaguars, a team that I think will be very competitive in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be real too, as you say, with the Bengals kind of falling apart, with the Browns looking vulnerable, with DTR and
They really needed to win in a very specific way.
yeah, and with, I would say, the Steelers being largely pretenders,
Yes,
the
yes.
AFC wild card is fairly open. So I could totally see the Texans still making the playoffs despite this, because right now it's Steelers, Browns, Colts, and I think that the Texans are better than all of those teams.
I agree.
Certainly the Colts.
Comprehensively, I say. Like the Browns' defense, I think, is probably maybe the best unit of those teams. But not like I don't think any team is better.
But is it
than
enough to make up for the offense?
No, right.
So especially because for some reason Njoku has like caught this real drop bug, and I feel badly for him because he's had such a horrible year. But he had some egregious drops, and I felt bad for DTR, who ended up getting really badly concussed. It appeared, with his mouth bleeding at one point during that game. We should say, how many wins in a row is that right now for the Broncos? They're winning in a very specific way too, but they're in the hunt.
But 6, maybe 5 or 6.
I mean, they're like definitely playing really, really well. I mean, they are 6 and 5, and so are the Texans.
But they're following this format, which is like play extremely conservative rust ball and don't turn it over, and defense be like not literally the worst defense in the league.
Exactly.
and honestly, they're doing okay with it.
And that's because Sean Payton is is the kind of guy that understands football, and why the stupid Chargers should have hired him, because that's where apparently he wanted to go. Warm
to actually
weather,
instill some
Herbert.
sort of discipline within the organization.
I mean, we'll get to the Chargers in a second, but we have to talk about the other disaster here, which is the Carolina Panthers. So Frank Reich has been fired. We have those clips, right?
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Frank Reich has been fired by the very impulsive David Tepper.
The big-brained David Tepper.
Reich was fired by the Colts last year after their 3-5-1 start, which I thought was kind of insane because they were starting Matt Ryan, who couldn't throw the football, and Frank Reich was doing the absolute best that he could to manage that situation. It was widely regarded as a fairly unfair firing by the, I don't know who's more impulsive, Jim Irsay or David Tepper. I'm actually gonna go with Tepper at this point, given like his last few decisions. The mega contract to Matt Rule, then the trade up to 1 to take Bryce Young, and then the firing of Frank Reich, who, by basically every telling of the situation, did not want to draft Bryce Young. This is the clip. We played this before the draft. We have 2 of these. We're going to go back in time in a time machine to basically crap all over David Tepper and defend Frank Reich here. Because, like, Frank Reich is a former NFL quarterback. He has shown a propensity for quarterbacks that are bigger armed. He's not the kind of guy that would be interested in a Bryce Young or in that kind of offense that's more rhythm and more about reads. He wants he stuck with Carson Wentz for a really long time, much to the chagrin of ownership in Philly, partly because that is his philosophy. This was him with CJ Stroud and Josh McCown, who was also fired, by the way, by David Tepper before the draft. And everyone was like, okay, here we go. They're taking Stroud.
Done it well, bro. That was great.
I'll be there, I think, 17th after.
Let's see.
There's Tepper.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, we'll find a court. Play some horses.
It's right here, come on.
We'll find a court.
I got to do a little meeting.
We'll find a court. All right, see you, buddy.
Now I'm going to take his money.
We'll find a court. We'll find a court to play pickup basketball is basically what Josh McCown is saying there to CJ Stroud and everyone at the time.
He says at that point, maybe in Charlotte.
Yep.
Like he says, like it's like
which is just basically saying we're gonna take you. Like we like you so much. This was at his workout.
Right. They're pretty poorly telegraphing that like they really would like to select, or at least just are like very impressed with his game, like very impressed with what he was able to do. Like
yeah, because it looks great because he was clearly the superior quarterback. As I said 400 million times in the pre-draft process, it was not close. This was also another kind of, and again, this is after they ended up taking Bryce Young, but all of the circumstantial evidence points to that McCown as well, by the way, who's a traditional quarterback, and Frank Reich were interested and wanted CJ Stroud. This was in season, Frank Reich talking about David Tepper and their meetings and what it's like. David Tepper has a reputation of being a tempestuous, difficult person to work with. And those accusations were not in any way put to rest by what Reich had to say here.
There's different philosophies in ownership. You know what I mean? Some owners kind of stay away and don't engage a whole lot. Other owners do. And his philosophy is he's going to engage. And listen, it's only been a short experience, but it's been a really good experience. It hasn't been fun. You know, it's not fun. Those meetings aren't, I wouldn't characterize them as fun meetings. But those meetings make me better, and I trust they make us better.
Basically, he's saying that.
I'm miserable.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely miserable, but like
it makes me better.
It's fine.
I feel badly for the guy.
You should still keep signing my checks.
It's weird too because like I also think that his daughter was a part of the organization before he got hired as some sort of PR or marketing person. And Frank Reich was drafted to be the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. People forget, but he has like an emotional resonance with this franchise. And David Tepper basically said, screw that emotional resonance. I don't really want to look inward about my decision to take this tiny 5'10", very skinny, not that athletic quarterback first overall and not take the guy who can throw every kind of throw throw him on a rope, perfect spiral, perfect mechanics, competitor, psycho in the good way, all those things, and it's bearing fruit. And like, it's incredible to me that he's allowing, like, that Tepper doesn't have the self-awareness to understand. Oh, I guess he was not drafted by the Carolina Panthers, excuse me. He was drafted by the Buffalo Bills. He started with the Buffalo Bills, and then he played for the Panthers at a certain point. My apologies. But Frank Reich. But like, the point being is that this is a classic example of a really, really rich guy having no one around him to tell him no and thinking he knows everything. And he can't look inwards, so what does he got to do? He has a 4-year contract, Frank Reich. The billionaire doesn't care. He'll pay that out. He's just going to get rid of a guy instead of actually acknowledging, no, I actually screwed up big time here.
Well, and I mean, even beyond the selection of Young, not to say nothing of the enormous amount of draft capital given up to do so.
Yeah.
With the fact that...
Okay, wait, actually, sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
I saw this tweet. The Panthers arguably traded Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Jalen Carter, Tank Dell, and a 2025 second for the right to select Bryce Young over CJ Stroud.
Because obviously, speculatively, I mean, presumably, if the 1 in 10 Panthers continuing going down the road that they're going, that pick might end up being someone's, blue chip quarterback next year.
Well, because they traded away DJ Moore, the pick that the Eagles went back up to 9 to take Jalen Carter. The Bears went down one spot. And then they also traded the 3rd round pick that Tank Dell was selected by, and they're the worst team in the NFL this year. So they could have taken Caleb Williams.
It's really harrowing when you put it that way.
To take Bryce Young over CJ Stroud.
And here's what I'll say to not I place so even just hearing about, as we've discussed on the show prior, that the emphasis that Tepper had on this S1 test and how that may have factored in his decision making, this like reflexes or kind of like cognitive test that supposedly Stroud did not do very well on, but Young performed very well on. Which he, when this has been discussed, it hasn't been, I think, discussed very prominently that Tepper himself and the team itself is invested in the company that produces the S1 test, and the S1 test doesn't publicly disclose any of its results. So, it seems like that is kind of at least emblematic to me of some real legendary venture capitalist brain to say that this is how I should this is what I should put stock into in terms of evaluating how a football player plays football, how a quarterback functions on an NFL field based on whether he can say the alphabet backwards while balancing a pool noodle on his foot. But other than that, the personnel has also been a huge problem, and I think that I lay a little bit less at Frank Reich's feet, and that I think
it's Fitterer,
is that
GM.
Scott Fitterer. I mean, this offensive line coming into the year was not supposed to be one of, if not maybe the worst units in the entire league. I actually thought they were going to be a kind of top half unit, and they're terrible. Bryce Young can't get to his back foot fast enough before getting sacked. He literally has no time to operate. And with the trade to get Bryce Young, leaving, rendering DJ Moore off to Chicago, a number one option, a young, dynamic number one option on the Panthers left their team, which would have been kind of a nice option for Bryce Young to have instead of throwing to an extremely raw second-round rookie in Jonathan Mingo. A 34-year-old Adam Thielen who can't get separation and is still somehow, some way, his most reliable target. And a few other guys that are just not doing anything for him, or not doing anything super prominent in Miles Sanders and Hayden Hurst. It's just Young, I don't think nearly, especially as we're seeing play out, and I think in terms of draft prognostication, I don't necessarily think he had as high of a ceiling as Stroud. But he's also been put in a really, really suboptimal place to even have a shot to succeed.
Well, let me just push back slightly to say that, it clearly to me seems like it's an ownership decision to go up to number one and get your guy.
Yeah.
But if your guy, and if you have football knowledge and your guy is Bryce Young, everybody understands you have to play a specific way. You can't plug him into any offense in the way you can with really elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Joe Burrow can play in any offense.
Mm.
CJ Stroud could play in any offense. Like, there's an offense that has been crafted for Tua down in Miami that someone like CJ Stroud could have success in, right? Like with
Bryce or
sorry,
Ew.
that Bryce Young could have success in, right? Because he can, like, it can be a little bit more movement based. It can be about a quick release as opposed to having to pat the ball and make a power throw downfield. And so I get everything you're saying. The line and the receiving room, it's a joke. But if you knew you were going to take Bryce Young, hiring Frank Reich, more traditional passing
even
coach,
the hire itself did not make a whole lot of sense.
you gotta like, at least be upfront with him or have a plan about who you're going to take in that instance, because he's the kind of coach that's going to craft that kind of offense. Like, if you always, they went into the hiring process with pretty much zero plan about quarterback, and who they were going to take. And so, like, there was an alternative option where they could have hired a coach that would have played to Bryce Young's strengths. But even so, executing that kind of offense is so much more of a high wire act than it is to take a guy that has a big arm and can read defenses and can fit the ball into tight windows.
Yeah, right. And I think to your point, like McDaniel is the McDaniel-Tua partnership makes a great deal of sense because McDaniel is so attuned to Tua's strengths, and he has adhered a lot of the personnel decisions as he's been there, obviously in conjunction with their general manager and front office, to also adhere to Tua's strengths, and that just seemingly has not happened whatsoever with the Panthers. Whenever they decided that they were going to go with Bryce Young, it just does not seem like there's been any sort of, beyond like hiring every sort of name brand coach in terms of Reich and McCown and Dom Capers and like all these
But
football luminaries, like
they're more
still
traditional guys.
Right, traditional.
They clearly thought they were taking Bryce Young until the owner said no.
Right, and I think they were taking Stroud.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry.
And no worries. And
Rusty.
But all that is to say is, I think to that end is like, there just simply was not a coherent team philosophy at all.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I think, probably stands from an owner just wanting to kind of do what he thinks is right.
I mean, what was that Darnold trade about?
Right.
What was that Darnold trade about? What was that Baker Mayfield acquisition about? Like, there have been so many insane decisions that the Panthers have made since Tepper has bought the team.
Yeah, with Rule they had Darnold, Mayfield, Matt Corral, and PJ Walker all on roster. Like,
yes.
Like, why did you need all four of them? And like, what were you planning on doing with all four of them?
Yeah, it's nuts. And so
they ran Robbie Anderson, or now Chosen Anderson. Robbie Chosen, I don't remember what he's changed his name to. But he was miserable in Carolina and was traded to Miami for nothing. And he's a good player. Like, there's just been a lot of just attrition for attrition's sake.
They've become, I would say, with the Texans' success here, oddly, the most dysfunctional team in the NFL right now. More than
sitting at 1-10 with no coach.
More than the Arizona Cardinals, who we thought were actively tanking to start the year and who just have looked more coherent and explosive on offense even without freaking Kyler Murray.
Yeah, they got kind of rocked by the Rams yesterday. But
yes, I know.
But season wide,
yes,
I would say honestly, I have much more of a long-term optimistic outlook for the Arizona Cardinals than I do the Panthers. The Panthers are 1-10. They just fired their coach, and no matter how bad they are, they're not drafting somebody.
They're not even trying to tank, and yet they're the team that's having the most success.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry, Carolina Panthers
truly,
fans, but
it's bleak stuff.
I understand trying to look on the bright side, but I don't think any coach could have come into this situation and had success. And the real problem is David Tepper. Speaking of other coaches, speaking of the coach that should be fired today, Brandon Staley is a joke, dude. Like, why do we have to keep making this damn same case every single week? And it
happens every week. It literally happens every week.
And I had hope going into the year that the offense would be more explosive with Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator. I've defended Justin Herbert many, many times here. Some of the blame is starting to like fall on him a little bit. He's so conservative these days.
Yeah, he really is.
And I don't understand why that is. I think in part because you have probably coaching from someone like Staley being like a defensive head coach, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake. But also because I think he's so shell-shocked from all of like this pressure on him for so much time that he's not really taking risks. The way that the Chargers run their offense is so unsustainable and so frustrating to watch. Like, it's run as if it's the Bryce Young offense in Carolina, where they go 20 yards in 15 plays. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly, but like, it's Keenan Allen, and then it's a tough catch or two by Gerald Everett, and no one else can make a play. Austin Eckler was not good yesterday. And he's been good in the past, but he hasn't been the same this year. And that's really where the blame ends with Justin Herbert, because mostly it's coaching, and he's never really had a stable situation, except for that 1 year with Shane Steichen where he exploded.
Right.
But Staley is really setting him up to fail, and it's mostly I can't stand Staley. I can't stand how he coaches zero toughness into this team, which was so evident when he plays the toughest coach team, arguably, outside maybe the 49ers in the NFL and the Ravens, who hit the hardest. Or that's their brand and has been for decades. It's what makes them such a fun organization. Like, they are tough SOBs, and they try to hit the hell out of you. And they did that to the Chargers. It was so evident who was more disciplined and who was not last night. But again, putting that aside, the talent is horrible on the in the receiving room. Like, I'm sick of hearing how much talent that the Chargers have on offense. They just don't. Like, I understand Mike Williams is out for the year, but Keenan Allen is in his 30s.
He's playing really well, but he's a very specific type of receiver.
Exactly.
In terms of what you can get out of him in an explosive way.
And like, Telesco, did you see who scored the only 2 touchdowns for the Ravens last night?
Say Flowers.
You know who could have made some plays after the catch, which is the most desperately needed thing in this offense? Say Flowers. You know who can't do that seemingly? Quentin Johnson. And now, who knows? Johnson at TCU, he had more speed than it appears like he has for the Chargers. Who knows how much of that is coaching? But it seemed pretty clear who was more talented going into that draft. And also, the 2 guys selected after Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. Addison would have been another great option for that team. Staley coached Aaron Donald and conned his way into a head coaching job, and the Chargers are just way too cheap to have let him go last year and actually ponied up the real money instead of hoarding it, the Spanos family, to get Sean Payton, because he wanted to be there. He wanted to coach Justin Herbert. He wanted to fix him. And it's getting to the point where, like, I have to hope Herbert can be fixed because of how talented he is as a thrower, but he seems broken right now, as is the entire team. And that falls on Staley.
You want to hear a joke?
What? That the Chargers have the second highest payroll on defense, and it's like arguably one of the 3 worst defenses in the NFL.
Zay Flowers had 62 yards last night. This is from Josh Norris at Underdog Fantasy. Zay Flowers had 62 yards tonight. He posted this a little bit after the game, or close to the end of the game. 12 more than Quentin Johnson has produced in a single game this season, and 2 touchdowns.
Oh yeah, and that was a rushing touchdown too.
So to be clear,
which was the more creativity than this offense has shown all year.
Right. So like literally a sort of like pseudo trick or draw play for Zay Flowers, because again, as we've said, an explosive athlete, a very good wide receiver, more in line with what has been kind of innovated and structured into this modern day NFL of like very turbocharged, smaller but very powerful slot guys who are very fast, unlike Quentin Johnston, who is like slight, tall, kind of a statue, and literally can't catch.
Yeah.
Claps the ball, does not catch outside of his chest very often. Like, is an actual liability when he's on the field. And I know he's a rookie, and I don't want to be too hard on him, but like so is Zay Flowers.
Yeah, and these
so is
receivers,
Jordan Addison. So is Tank Dell, and Tank Dell was drafted in the 3rd round.
Yeah, receivers coming out these days, they're able to hit the ground running.
And if you aren't, you are a serious, especially with how, as you just said, Emma, the influx of young talent at the wide receiver position. It sticks out like a sore thumb when you are the team that is not doing basically anything right to actually help your generationally talented quarterback who is so seemingly traumatized by the inability of there to be any semblance of stability or any semblance of like balance in what he's doing, that he is relegated to hurdling checkdowns at the closest guy.
Yeah, it's
perfect, accurate pinpoint checkdowns with an arm like a cannon.
Yeah,
and that's what he's reduced to.
That's apparently what they were paying him the big bucks for. I would look at when the NBC broadcast, which like, oh boy, Jason Garrett. He was okay last night.
It was such a jump scare when I realized who it was. I thought it was Louis Riddick.
I don't understand what
NBC,
like,
whoa.
NBC has decided that they're gonna hire from here on out everybody that has zero edge that has come out of the NFL with the Tony Dungy crap, which I mean I'm not seeing him much. Maybe they
they were sort of like, hey, after the whole litter box thing, we gotta put that guy in ice for a little bit.
He does not like gay people, and that's been clear for many years. But they decided that they were gonna hire him anyway. But like they keep hiring these guys that are really anodyne, at least in their football analysis, and always try to say just only nice things about everybody. I mean, Garrett, whatever. It wasn't as bad as I thought, but I prefer Collinsworth having a little bit more edge, or I actually don't mind Chris Collinsworth. But putting that aside for a second.
I like him enough.
As a broadcaster. Yeah. Putting that aside for a second. Oh yeah, I kept looking at the broadcast last night. Every time that they would do the shot from basically the quarterback's point of view, seeing what Herbert was seeing. No one's open. No one is ever open. Ever open. No one is ever open.
Because the routes that they're running, because of who these guys are, they're not designed in any sort of way to have a path beyond the catch point. It's literally just to catch the ball and then stand on the ground. That's what Keenan Allen does. That's what Gerald Everett does. That's what Donald Parham does because he's 6'8". And I mean, Parham's an okay receiver, and he's good in the red zone because he's so big. But he can't. That guy's not going to be able to shoot off 20 yards downfield. He just can't do it. Like
speed at the wide receiver position is the name of the game in the modern day NFL, and the Chargers are in the Stone Ages. They're in the Stone Ages.
Absolutely, and just want to highlight, because I'm just every single time I watch this team, they amaze me. I mean, talk about the diametrically opposed franchise in the Baltimore Ravens that find diamonds in the rough everywhere they go, and that make players on their team, whether they are draft picks, high draft picks, low draft picks, off the street acquisitions, just make them play their best football when they're in Ravens
the best
uniforms.
Drafting team in my lifetime on a consistent basis.
Keaton Mitchell is an undrafted free agent, and he is one of the fastest and most dynamic running backs so far in the NFL. He literally came out. His dad played for the Ravens, but he was an undrafted free agent. He literally was not drafted in 250 picks. He was
Kyle
not
Hamilton, who they took in the first round, playing like a stud,
playing his best football. Arthur Millette, a no-name guy who was not very good on the Jets or the Giants, is literally a dynamic, tough, tenacious safety who made a huge play at the end of the game to sack Herbert, while also having his hands fully up, like literally running at him like a bear, to stifle the throw and get the sack.
Yeah.
Geno Stone. I did not know who Geno Stone was prior to the season. He's literally playing safety at an all-pro level.
You know who's breaking out too? Odafe Owe.
Odafe Owe is explosive at rushing the passer and in the run game. Patrick Queen, now that they figured out that they're not going to put him in coverage nearly as much, has just been dominating with what he does
Oh my
well, which is
gosh.
play with aggression and rage and violence.
You see
and
number 6 flying all over the field.
always flying at guys. Like, that's just what he's best at. Jadeveon Clowney.
Yes.
Jadeveon Clowney. What happened to Jadeveon Clowney? He's on the Ravens playing some of the best football he's played in a very long time.
Well, they're smart. They put him out in like passing situations,
Exactly.
and they know they're not going to overwork him because he has some injury
They
issues.
utilize these guys
Yep.
so perfectly for what they are actually meant to do and what they are best at. And you see all of these guys who at any different juncture in their career are playing their best football now under Mike McDonald and under the Ravens. Like, you don't see that on bad teams because bad teams don't coach their players well.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing in LA over and over.
They hit on Ronnie Stanley. They hit on Zay Flowers.
Yes.
They
Tyler
hit-
Linderbaum is reliable at center for them. He's just there.
Those are all like I'm trying to. All right, here we go. We're gonna look at the Ravens' first round picks from the last. I just need to do this right now from the last like few years at this point. So Zay Flowers, that's a hit.
Good pick.
Tyler Linderbaum
Good
and
pick.
Kyle Hamilton, they had 2 first rounders in 2022. I don't even know how. Oh, must have been the trade of Orlando Brown to Kansas City.
Yeah, to the
Okay.
Chiefs, yeah. But both good picks.
Yeah. Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum, they hit on that. Odafe Owe, hit.
Good pick.
Rashad Bateman, he's okay. Patrick Queen, they
Good
hit
pick.
on that. Good pick. Marquise Brown, no longer on the team.
Yeah, not a great pick.
Not a great pick, but he at least you could see the vision there. Somebody that could stretch the field. Lamar Jackson, hit.
Yeah, well, 30th pick.
Hayden Hurst no longer on the team, but I actually don't mind Hayden Hurst.
He's a good
He's a very
player.
good run
Yeah.
blocker. Marlon Humphrey, hit.
Hit. Great.
Ronnie Stanley, hit.
Great players.
Rashad Perryman, again,
Miss.
yeah, a little bit of a miss. CJ Mosley, hit.
Great pick. Amazing player.
I just, that's 2014. Like, that is
That's
basically
9 years
10
ago. That's
10
literally 9 years ago.
9 years ago, and you can feasibly say
There were maybe two-ish flops.
yes.
Hollywood Brown and Rashad Perriman.
the Ravens are incredible, and they also maximize their talent and
And a
coach
lot of
those guys up.
And a bunch of these guys that we haven't mentioned are because they were not picked in the first round.
Yes.
Like David Ojabo, who is still has untapped potential from last year's draft because he was injured and he's coming back. Keaton Mitchell, undrafted. Isaiah Likely, their tight end, was a late
Had
round
a great
pick.
game.
Yeah, later round pick. Like so many of these guys that they have on their team. Travis Jones out of UConn is a later round pick on their defensive line who's still playing really well. Like there's so many guys on this team. They hit on their prime picks and then completely fill out the roster with guys that can actually make a difference. Like there is such an actual this is why, as much as the draft in some high leverage ways is a crapshoot, sometimes it's not when you are so consistently good at identifying talent and how to use it. That's when it becomes a skill.
Yeah. I mean,
So that's why I think the Ravens.
Yeah.
I think
they can win the Super Bowl.
I think that I wanted that tying it back to the Jaguars conversation is what I was going to say here, which is like, especially now, I think the Ravens have a prime opening to really make some noise.
Like the Eagles, they can win in different ways.
Totally.
That was a
totally.
defensive
100%.
kind of sloppy game last night.
Even if Lamar is kind of slightly off or like off kilter, like not really producing as
He
much
misses
as he usually
Mark
does.
Andrews. That's the one
certainly,
thing that
totally.
I think
that is a huge. It's just because he's the safety blanket for Lamar.
he's amazing on 3rd and long or like on gotta have it downs, and they really miss that. If Likely can somewhat fill the void, I do think the Ravens
totally.
can win the Super Bowl. But that
Because with the change of pace is Gus Edwards, who has been a touchdown machine, and Mitchell, who is so fast to kind of break up the style of run, that they have those two options for themselves.
Yeah.
If Lamar is having trouble,
Right.
It's
Ravens Eagles would be the most fun Super Bowl.
yeah, that would be amazing.
Oh,
And even some of these potential games, like Ravens Chiefs, would be a crazy
AFC Championship.
game. Yeah.
Totally. It'd be very interesting. We'll see, what happens with like who gets home field advantage, because it's so bunched up at the top. I think the Ravens have 3 losses, the Chiefs have 3 losses, the Jags have 3 losses, but they lose the tiebreaker with the Chiefs. And
the Ravens are going into their bye, so they're
yeah,
I think have more games played, I guess.
they're 9-3.
9-3, yeah.
Yeah. So, very interesting. The AFC is exciting in that way.
Yeah, so a lot, just like so many good teams.
Even though like the Chiefs' dominance, we expected them to be more dominant this year, but it makes it more wide open. Okay, so yeah, fire Brandon Staley. My other rant today is that Derek Carr is so obnoxious, and if I see him scream at his receivers or his tight ends one more time, when he's one of the worst red zone quarterbacks who gets the more overhyped than I've ever seen in my entire life, I'm gonna scream. Like, look, I was invested in Alvin Kamara going into the end zone, so I was following the New Orleans Saints and their red zone woes yesterday more than I usually would. But Derek Carr's last touchdown pass, you want to guess when that was, Bradley? Actually, start. The month of November is about to end. How many touchdown passes do you think that Derek Carr has thrown in the month of November?
Let me answer your question with a question. Is it more or less than the amount of pick sixes that Doron Bland has?
How many pick sixes?
Five.
It is definitely less than that. It is definitely less than that.
3?
2.
Oh my God.
Look, they had
Oh
a
my
bye in
God.
week 11, so they've only played 3 games. But that's still against the Bears, against the Vikings, and against the Falcons, the 3 games that they played in November. Derek Carr will have thrown 2 touchdown passes, and one of them was to Taysom Hill in the second quarter against the Bears on November 5th.
But it's crazy to me that a team that has legitimate explosiveness on their roster in Kamara, in Rashid Shaheed, and in Chris Olave, that they are so impotent and so have such difficulty moving the ball.
Yeah, and Rashid Shaheed, I think, went out, but again, he'd been pretty explosive.
In other games, I feel like we'd actually seen like some real field stretching ability from him, but like it was so few and far between those moments because Carr is just not that type of quarterback.
He had red zone woes last year, but it was so frustrating to see them get into the red zone like consistently.
Yeah.
And rip off fairly big chunk plays. I mean, Taysom Hill went off for a little bit. Chris Olave, before he went out with a concussion, was really amazing. But they would just get to the red zone and stall
out, yeah.
And there were 3 field goals in 5 red zone possessions. The other was Derek Carr throwing it to Jesse Bates, which was terrible.
Literally like 96-yard pick six the other way.
92. You're
92,
almost right.
92 yards.
You're almost right for a defensive touchdown. And then Taysom Hill fumbled, but that was just a really good play by, I think, again, Jesse Bates, where he knocked it out of Hill midair, which is always difficult.
Bates is playing unbelievable football
that
right
contract
now.
really looks good for them.
He's like all pro level safety play right now.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
so
I've always loved him.
It just is like it would be one thing if Derek Carr understood that he's the problem, but every time they go to him and he just knows the camera's on him and I just can't stand it, he screams at his receivers like he's freaking Tom Brady. I found it obnoxious when Tom did it, but Tom was Tom Brady. You're Derek Carr. Like, I would take so many quarterbacks over I would take this whiny prima donna who can't get it done but thinks he's hot shit because he started for a long period with the Raiders. I remember him saying, like, I'm going to be a Raider for life. Well, I mean, that's not up to you, buddy, and you haven't really proven anything. What did he have, 1 playoff win? Or no playoff wins?
There was just always, like...
And he's not even physically that gifted. Like, he doesn't really throw with much velocity, and that hurts him in the red zone, and he's a below-average athlete.
But I also just think it's pretty clear that, like, I at least think it's pretty clear that he is almost a derivative of Kirk Cousins, but less talented because at the very least, the majority of Kirk's quarterback play is much more sound and lends itself much better to an actual offensive scheme than Carr's does. Because when Kirk, the back-breaking mistakes and the kind of boneheaded mistakes are always kind of what dogged Kirk Cousins throughout his career prior to this injury. But when an offense was humming, it was also because of how much Kirk was contributing just to the maintenance and the flow and facilitation of the offense. Carr's play like stalls the offense.
Oh yeah, no.
It stagnates.
There's not even
offense.
a comparison, like in my opinion, because Carr is not smart like Kirk Cousins is. Kirk Cousins has almost perfect mechanics when he throws
Right,
the football.
right. His mechanics are better.
He's incredibly precise. And, I mean, maybe Carr's a marginally better athlete, but he never makes the same good decisions.
Right.
And,
there's so much being left on the table, I think, with this personnel. And also someone pointed out in the YouTube chat, Derek R. here pointed out that, by some metrics,
Derek Carr pointed that
Oh,
out?
Derek, excuse me, not
Derrickson.
Derek.
I mean,
Derek R., not to be confused with Derek Carr.
Derek Carr, who's known to block people who criticize him on Twitter, would be yelling at us in the YouTube chat.
I mean, you might want to check on that after the show.
Yeah.
The Saints offense with Andy Dalton was moving more smoothly and more effectively in some metrics last season than Derek Carr. And Andy Dalton,
I have stats on that.
And Andy Dalton, they could have had him stay for a cup of coffee or for basically nothing relative to spending actual assets on bringing Derek Carr over from Vegas.
Yeah, it is shocking when you see this. First 11 starts with the Saints. Andy Dalton, 66.7% completion percentage, compared to Derek Carr's 65.6% completion. So that's very similar. Andy Dalton stretched the field more, 7.6 yards per attempt versus 6.8 yards per attempt. In terms of quarterback rating, Andy Dalton was 98.1, Derek Carr's 88.5. And they threw for similar yardage. Andy Dalton at 2,403 yards, Derek Carr at 2,535 yards. Andy Dalton had way more passing touchdowns, 17 touchdowns to Derek Carr's 10 touchdowns. Andy Dalton had 7 interceptions to 5 interceptions for Derek Carr. I mean,
the 17, but the 17-10 is, I think, partially what you need to see. And honestly, I wouldn't even say this is an upgrade. But when Jameis Winston came in for Derek Carr, what you did see is because what Jameis Winston does, which is always what Jameis Winston will do, is I'm going to throw an 80-yard, I'm going to throw a 60-yard pass to Chris Olave in the end zone. I'm going to try and find A.T. Perry, who is relatively limited but fast. I'm going to try to find that guy 40 yards downfield, and even that is a change of pace enough to show that there are possibilities for this offense with the skill position players they have that those chances that are just not being taken because Carr is not that quarterback.
Yeah, he's just not that guy. And
the Saints defense is good. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
If they actually had a more ambitious quarterback that actually played to the strengths of the guys that are actually running routes, there would be much more to talk about.
That game was there to be had for the Saints yesterday. And
Totally.
Derek Carr was the problem. And I'm just going to go through this thought experiment here because I would take explosive plays are the number one thing in the NFL that is
totally.
now the new NFL.
The currency now.
And Derek Carr is not a guy that's going to that seemingly at this point in his career is leading to that. So I would take these guys over Derek Carr. Tua, I would take over Derek Carr, and you know I'm critical of Tua. I would take Justin Fields over Derek Carr because of his running ability.
Yep. Agreed.
I would take Baker Mayfield over Derek Carr.
I'd take especially this version of Baker Mayfield. I think he's been playing pretty well this season.
I'd take Kyler Murray over Derek Carr.
Definitely take Kyler Murray over.
I would take Jared Goff over Derek Carr.
Yep, totally.
Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins.
Absolutely. Both.
Daniel Jones. Honestly, maybe when healthy.
Yeah, it's still a toss-up. I would think about it.
When healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd think about it. I wouldn't take Kenny Pickett over Derek Carr.
No, that's where I draw the line. Pickett is not very good.
I wouldn't take him over. I wouldn't take Mac Jones.
No.
Jimmy G. I would take Derek Carr over. I don't know. I'm just saying, But
but the thing is, what we're trying to say is we're basically saying that only maybe the bottom 5 quarterbacks or bottom 10 we wouldn't take over Derek Carr. Maybe bottom 7.
Mm-hmm. In terms of starters, would you take Gardner Minshew over Derek Carr right now?
Yes, I would.
That's pathetic.
Because Minshew at the very least,
I gotta take Anthony Richardson or
Minshew at the very least, he's not as skilled, but he's more. He tries more. He tries more stuff.
Yeah. I'd take Jordan Love over Derek Carr.
Yeah, definitely take Jordan Love over Derek Carr.
Would I take Russell Wilson over Derek Carr?
Yes, I would. I still would.
Yeah, because he can still kind of run.
And he's still like inventive a little bit. Like he's still trying.
Yeah.
Like even when obviously he has like 4 guys bearing down on him, he'll still try and like do his little.
I'd take Geno
kinky
Smith
jump
over
passes.
Derek Carr.
Of course, I'd take Geno 20 times over.
Anyway, R.I.P. Derek Carr.
Yeah, I think I don't really. If I'm the Saints, I don't really know how much we can continue to get out of this.
They need a
Dennis Allen.
Let's go.
Derek
I mean,
Carr
I don't even
partnership.
care if they win the division at this point. Like the team, I don't know what they're still clinging on to. It's time to tear down and rebuild.
They have a similar thing with the Panthers too, where
And the Raiders.
Yeah,
They remind me of the Raiders, where it's like, what are you? Are you going to rebuild, or are you going to do? What are you
I just
gonna
say
do?
that I just say that too because with similar to the Panthers, but also to the Raiders, is that the quarterback experiment I think definitely is not working for obviously the influx of a vet quarterback to kind of like keep things on the tracks is not working. They have actually, I think, good or exciting skill position players, but the offensive line is terrible.
Yeah.
It's also terrible when it wasn't supposed to be. I did not think a combination of Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and Trevor Penning. Trevor Penning is bad. Trevor Penning is when Trevor Penning is played. When he has played, and I say that because he's literally been injured the majority of his young career. He's barely been on the field, and when he is, he's either committing penalties or getting hurt again.
Yep.
Which is like, again, I don't even mean to. I'm not trying to fault him for that. I'm just saying he had durability concerns before he came into the league. Those have maintained, and when he's played, he hasn't been good.
Yeah.
And the defense is good enough, and the skill position players are good enough where it's like. It kind of seems like a waste that Carr is this the offensive scheme is this uninspiring, Carr is this uninspiring, and the line is bad.
Yeah. It does seem like a waste, and I just wonder if if ownership is like starting to get a little
Antsy.
I would want things to change in that way. So, we're gonna wrap up here, I think, but we'll give some quick hits on the other games that I found a little bit less interesting. The Giants winning 10-7.
Let's go.
Kill me. The one thing that's,
Tommy Cutlets.
yeah, did you hear that? Did you hear?
He came out of the Sopranos theme.
Oh, I told you this morning. I mean, I'm in the middle of my Sopranos watch, so
It's so good.
It's so good. They're really funny about it. I mean, you know,
why not? There's not much to look forward to. Let's have fun with it, huh?
the only bright spot on that Patriots offense is Ramondre Stevenson. And by the way, Zappy is worse than Mac Jones, but Mac Jones is freaking horrible.
They're both bad, but what's a bummer about them two specifically is that they're like kind of the same guy.
Yeah, but Zappy has like a little bit less zip on his
That's
on
the
football
thing is like
and is smaller.
Even Mac's arm is not particularly anything to write home about. He kind of has a bit of the popcorn arm.
Yeah.
But like both of them have it a little bit, but Zappy is, as you said, is just like somehow less accurate and stupider.
And it's just incredibly embarrassing that they lost in that way when the Giants didn't have Dexter Lawrence, like their best player on defense, and they
could only
put
muster
up
one
7 points.
rushing touchdown.
It was a breakout run by Ramondre Stevenson. So,
fourth time this year that Mac Jones was benched.
I don't see it getting any better.
No.
Maybe they start that guy Malik Cunningham next week.
Oh, I didn't even know they had a third string.
Oh, yes, they do. They let go of Will Greer now. So
Oh, I did see that. Okay,
the
interesting.
dysfunction continues. I mean, Bill has completely lost the locker room, and that's obvious.
Yeah, I think I think we're getting closer and closer to the hot seat watch for Belichick.
Oh, it's done. I mean, if he still wants to break Shula's record, I think that they're going to trade him to another organization, is what I'm seeing like rumors of online, in the way that Sean Payton was traded to the Broncos, so the Pats can get something for him.
Right. I think they're at any rate, even now, I think there is a desperate team that would want a 72-year-old Bill Belichick after this season.
That is such loser mentality.
Some teams just can't help themselves.
Yeah, I wonder who might be in the running for that. That'll be fascinating to watch. The Steelers finally outgained their opponent and won a game.
First game for that, I think, to go over 400 offensive yards, which was a feat never accomplished by Matt Canada.
And Freiermuth had a day, 9 receptions for 120 yards, as did Najee Harris, who, you know, I know that he's not like the kind of running back that fits in the modern NFL, honestly, and probably shouldn't have been a first-round pick. But there's something about him that I like. I like him and Nick Chubb as players in the sense that they're captains that are at the running back position, which Saquon too. But but you don't necessarily always see that, right? Like they're kind of a leader on their team, and I just like Najee as a guy, so I was happy to see him get a touchdown, especially because of all the hype around Jalen Warren these days. But I don't have confidence at all going forward in the Steelers' offense in general. The Panthers suck. Derrick Henry, this is the time of year when he starts to get going, right? Like all these defenses are kind of banged up, and he's just a bull in a china shop plowing through. So I'm happy for Derrick Henry, one of the true workhorse backs in the NFL, he still got it. He still got it. I was happy to see him get multiple touchdowns, 2 touchdowns yesterday. Bryce Young is just so bad. I can't even talk about it without being mean. The Colts-Bucs game was a total roller coaster. The Colts, they felt like they should have won by more, and they let the Bucs hang around. But gritty runs, gritty throws by Minshew. Michael Pittman is like clearly a favorite, I think, of Shane Steichen, because he's always getting him open and trying to get him the ball. And he had over 100 yards yesterday. Mike Evans had a bunch of touchdowns, and he looks like
he's like Derrick Henry of the wide receivers to me.
Yes.
Just in the sense of he even 10 years on is just still.
That's such a good call.
Dutifully getting 1,000 yards, getting open, juking guys out of their shoes at his size, and still getting he'll probably get close to 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns this year still.
Totally,
yeah.
and he's just a workman in that way, and he just goes about his business and doesn't.
It's
really...
truly just it's like death taxes. Mike Evans having 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns.
And he's so durable. I mean, I always used to.
That's what's amazing is
advocate for him in fantasy because he has 1,000-yard season every year. I don't even know what he's on pace for right now. Do you mind looking that up, actually? Oh, and an aside about that Texans game. Those all-red uniforms are fire, by the way. I just saw a photo of it.
Listen to this. 54. We're 12 weeks in.
Yeah.
54 receptions, 850 yards.
Oh, he's doing it again.
9 touchdowns.
He's doing it again. Another 1,000
It's literally
yard
you could
receiver.
set your watch to it.
It's amazing. He really
and
is.
he's 30 years old.
And he's gonna hit the market next year. There was a contract dispute because he wanted an extension. The Bucs basically said no. So some lucky team's gonna get Mike Evans.
We'll have that vet, the Grizzly vet in their locker room for sure.
We touched on the Broncos game a bit. Again, the Russell Wilson is only throwing for 134 yards, so I don't love the overstating of how great he's been. But they're playing a specific way, and the Browns honestly could use that way to be, that more conservative approach on offense to have success. PJ Walker, if DTR is out for a while, is not the guy to do that. Nor is it really the guy if you have a rookie quarterback, because that's just a lot to put on him. The Rams totally beat up on the Cardinals. Matthew Stafford just is a Cardinal killer, as is Sean McVay. That was pretty cool to watch. Cooper Kupp's playing through some pain, and honestly, the Rams are in a wild card position, or could be soon. They're not yet, but they are definitely competing for one.
And Kyron Williams had himself another day. McVay's another guy that's always been good with that, finding diamonds in the rough with Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, my boys.
It's amazing that they're this
Kyron's
competitive, given the fact that they sold their soul to Satan in order to get that one Super Bowl.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think we covered it all. Chiefs Raiders we touched on as well. Happy for Antonio Pierce, even though I know they lost to the Chiefs, but they're putting up some more fight, and I want Antonio Pierce to have a good rest of the run as the Chiefs Raiders head coach, because they're much like what they did when they fired
Rich Bisaccia.
Yeah, when they fired Gruden, and Bisaccia took over and took them to the playoffs.
And they're like, no, McDaniels. We need McDaniels.
That didn't age that well.
It's got to be McDaniels.
Jesus Christ. All right, guys. Gonna read some IMs and get out of here. J-Man J's, the Derek Carr hate show. The Rangers looking great, Emma. They might win more than one game in the finals. Hey, they won. In the finals. That was not fair because Matt Zuccarello was their best player that year, and he fractured his skull. And had to relearn how to speak.
So stop it.
So stop. It's traumatic.
Lafreniere, Laugh is playing really well, though.
Oh, man. Well, he's on the line with Artemi Panarin, and it's like, why did Gerard Gallant not ever try that?
Maybe that's something that would have made sense to do.
I know my guy Capo Caco is not playing well, but
we'll take a wins where we can get it with Laf, right?
Yes, yeah, no, I got you. Lafreniere's got that kind of piss and vinegar in him. That is fun to watch.
And he's playing with confidence now.
He is. And it's amazing that even though Heedle has been out with it's now his 4th concussion in his young career, Trocheck has stepped up as
That's true. Yeah. Trocheck's also been looking pretty good.
So the Rangers,
Love to see it.
Yeah, we'll see. And they've had 2 shutouts this year, and it's all been from Jonathan Quick and not Shesterkin.
Oh my God.
And Shesterkin's playing well.
That's crazy.
But yeah, Quick is having some sort of resurgence.
Blast of the past.
Yeah. Dan from Columbus, Obi-Wan meme. Jameis Winston, that's not a name I've heard in a long time. Honestly, I didn't know he was still in the league, but I'm not a dedicated sports ball watcher. Well, thank you for listening regardless. Antonin Scaliago says Owe was the Orlando Brown trade. Yes, 100%. We think we said that. Antonin Scaliago goes, oh no, 2022 was Marquise to the Cardinals. Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry. Okay, my bad. Matt, I guess, says, I live in North Carolina, and I can tell you the silver lining of the Panthers' organizational dysfunction is that the fans aren't disappointed because there are barely any fans left.
Yeah, a lot of college basketball to
Yeah.
to North Carolina.
Casey answer, I really think Herbert is much more hurt than he's letting on with his hand injury. Maybe.
It's definitely possible.
Casey, oh yes, fire Staley. I love Herbert, and it sucks to see him not have any weapons he can trust besides Keenan Allen. Casey answer, now to the Browns being a trash franchise who have to pay Deshaun Watson like $60 million next year, all because they wanted to protect money for him. Yeah, it's insane. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator just wanted to give a shout out to Sharon Moore and Michigan for beating Ryan Day and Ohio State with one hand tied behind their back on Saturday. No head coach losing their All-American guard and #1 corner back in the second half. All of the Signgate bullshit still pulling out the victory. The Ohio State Buckeyes will be spending championship weekend on the couch for the 3rd straight year. Yeah, I think Ryan Day is done. I agree.
I think he's gonna be poached somewhere and get a lot of money.
I mean, I don't really know how good he is. Like the thing is,
it's the same thing. The reason I say it with Belichick, it's just like if you just get a job at a good school, I think people are just like, well, why don't we just get that guy?
Yeah, he can go to some little bit lesser tier college program, and they'll be like, oh, it's Ryan Day.
It's Ryan Day. Ryan Day coaches our team. He coached at Ohio State. He never beat Michigan, but
I mean, damn, Ohio State fans, they've got to just be in shambles because this is the game you lead up all year to. Michigan has been completely dominant against Ohio State over the past few years, and
it's tough.
Out Harbaugh.
It's tough. You have the best wide receiver in I don't know how long on your team, and because the quarterback play is not particularly is not particularly inspiring, it just wasn't enough. And the Michigan defense,
even when they had C.J. Stroud, who was great,
right?
They fall a little flat.
The Michigan D was in their lap basically the most of the game, and J.J. McCarthy and the running backs, Blake Corum, and those guys did just enough to get over the line. So good for Michigan.
Good for Michigan.
Hail to the victors and all that.
Yeah. Hail to the cheaters. Hugo's Burgers. Emma, can I get your thoughts on Hassan's giganto fluffball dog Kaya? She's getting so big. I don't know anything about Hassan's dog.
I'm sure I'd like the dog.
Lofink, happy Monday. Over the weekend, the rugby team I support, the Dragons, not the Sharks. Bradley lost 69-14 to the South African team called the Sharks. In fairness, several Sharks players have just won the men's rugby cup. Also, Emma, sorry if my joke about I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, and my MRIM was over the line. Absolutely not, Tom. It was not over the line. Don't you worry. Casey answer, I'm so glad I took Rishi in Dynasty. He might grow into the Tyreek role with how fast he is. Well, Casey answer, I think that's a bit optimistic. Tyreek Hill is a generational talent who is maybe one of the fastest players in the history of the league and also has this durability and toughness and ball skills that is very difficult to replicate. But I hope that Rashee Rice can be good. You don't want to set him up for success or for failure by calling him Tyreek Hill.
The enormous expectations.
Who I think is that you could make a case that he's still the best wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, he's the MVP of the Dolphins. I don't think he is anymore. You can make a case that he or AJ Brown right now. I mean, AJ Brown 100%. Is freaking amazing.
He's amazing. For this year in particular, where it seems like there's a little bit of a caveat with every quarterback. There are a lot of, I would say, non-QB MVP potentials.
Oh yeah, I wish Tyreek Hill would get the MVP, but I don't think he's popular around the league because he's not a good person.
Which might have something to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Also because, again, this league apparently only cares about quarterbacks. So,
Exactly.
and the final I am of the day. Snake balloon. As a Texas fan, I even find Michigan fans annoying. Well, there you go. Jury's in then. All right, folks, thank you so much for sticking with us. We are going to have a full locks episode on Thursday. Bradley and I both went 2-1 this last week, so maybe we're starting to get our crap together. And we will see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.